Welcome to Color Lovestream today, live from Ciudad de Mexico in Mexico City. And I actually, even though it doesn't look like this, I can almost touch Luis. Like he's just over there in the next room. and I want to report basically we had absolutely amazing camera tests. I'm going to explain why we were doing them as well and what's happening. It's all connected with the latest developments for FilmLab. And also, we had an amazing event last night here in Mexico. We had some of the top Mexico cinematographers come around. This place is heaving with creativity and super interesting people and lots of work. Actually, I don't know whether it's fair to say, but I think there's more like productions going in Mexico than in Hollywood at the moment in Los Angeles. I mean, it's not hard, thinking how little is being produced in Los Angeles at the moment. I don't think it's really hard to beat LA, but it just really felt it's a very, very dynamic place. Lots of interesting, people, and also some of our customers we met, and the stuff that they're doing, with our applications is just amazing. So altogether, I can highly recommend, like if anybody's considering like a short trip or like a visit somewhere where you haven't been before, come and visit Mexico City. You'll have an amazing time in traffic jam for sure. I can guarantee you that one. There's gonna be some protest going somewhere for sure. The air is heavily polluted, so your lungs will hurt when you first land. For the first hour, you will be getting used to the kind of that. But then after that, you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. So actually a really, really great place, and lots of people from all over the world. It seems to be like a kind of popular with these kind of nomads, digital nomads as well. So I was really surprised. Anyway, I want to go and talk to you a little bit about something. What I want to talk to now is something that I wasn't sure whether I should be talking about, but I think I am. I'm going to actually talk to you a little bit about what happened behind the scenes in the development of FilmLab. I think it's going to help you understand how different is FilmLab. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I regularly, when I speak to my customers, like or potential customers or cinematographers, they try to ask me, whether I can compare FilmLab to, let's say, Filmbox or Dehancer or something like that. And I'm trying always to explain to them that this is a really different product, that this is something really different. And I thought, in order, also for you to understand, how different it is, so that you can explain to your customers when you're working with them. And also, it's a really interesting insight into what went into development of it. And then I'm going to show you what we're building right now and explain to you why we were here in Mexico. And then I have a little poll for you. Okay. So you're going to help me design the future of FilmLab AI. We're making some changes and we just got some feedback from some people, but I really want to hear your opinion as well. So once I finish everything, I'm going to share with you a little Zoom poll where you're going to be able to just click on a couple of answers and then so help us make the right decision. And then also I want to open a little bit microphone and hear your thoughts, your stories, your ideas. This is really like about us, understanding how you guys are using it and how we can make a product better. We are actually getting ready to make it publicly released, and before we do that, we really want to make sure that we're making all the right changes. Let me just actually quickly now share my screen so you can see now my slides, isn't it? Yeah, all good. Is everything good? Fantastic. Okay, so basically, the whole conversation about FilmLab, started more than 2 years ago now. Okay, and it was actually Mexican cinematographer who instigated it, and the idea was, how can we get closer to what film looks like? But once we explored every single option that was out there, I mean, we literally worked with him and we used you know, our grain and our, you know, look designer. And then we used even, you know, Filmbox plugins and we tried everything, right? We didn't use the Hansa because that works in 709, so we can't really use it for professional productions. But you know, like we really try to kind of explore every option, every possibility, this and that. And we still were not able to convince the cinematographer that the digital emulation is actually going to, you know, be at that level that he really wanted to be. You know, he was clearly pointing at differences. You know, we did a test shoot on digital camera and test shoot on a film, and you know, they were side by side, and we're comparing it on a big screen, and there were clear differences that, you know, the emulation, that all available emulation, even including live grain, you know, everything wasn't really, you know, cutting it. Okay, so we said, okay, we need to kind of see what it really take. What would it take to do this better? So we did a test transfer. Okay, so what is this? So we developed a special type of image sequence that allows us to be able to analyze image a little bit better. Okay, and we then used a laser printers, you know, for transfer to a film negative. And then we used contact printing to transfer that negative to a film print. And then we went and we scanned that film print back in 4K. And then we used special, because this is the special alignment method. And then we were able to align pixel accurately, you know, what we sent and what came back. And we had them basically, you know, pixel accurate really. And the idea was, let's compare pixel by pixel what happens. Okay, let's see really what is the difference. And as you can imagine, you know, I had, you know, pixels in different saturation, different RGB values, different brightness, different luminance. We had all sorts of different things that we were trying to see. Okay, what happens when light is like this, the light is like that, and so on. But we really wanted to explore what happens at the lowest level, at the lowest minimum, at the pixel level. Okay, so now, if we were to take just one single pixel and we isolate that pixel, and you know, it was just a one pixel, nothing around it, what we noticed that when we actually, you know, looked at the image that came back to us, that there was this kind of a little life around that pixel, right? So you see, this is basically, this is our digital source, right? And this is like, think about this, is very, you know, made much bigger. And what we got is kind of, you know, and something that had a, you know, we understood, yes, we knew that there is a something, whatever we call it, halation, whatever it is, you know, the film gave something to it, right? It wasn't just a kind of, you know, sharp round pixel. It had actually some depth, had some sort of, you know, features around it. Okay. So then we said, okay, what would happen if we were to microscopically just zoom into these pixels? And you know, the pixel on a digital level is nothing else but the three LED lights, one red, one green, one blue. You know, if you really zoom into your digital screen and you look at it, that's what you see. And it's square. But when we actually, you know, microscopically zoomed at the pixel on an actual negative, on an actual piece of film, what we saw was just a lots of silver halide crystals that were activated. But what's very interesting, you see that the activation of this crystal wasn't like a limited on this kind of, you know, just a kind of a strong pixel shape. In opposite, there was like activations that is happening on the edges. And we understood, so it's actually, this is why we see, you know, that there is something happening around that pixel, because there isn't a clear on and off on film, right? They kind of, you know, your light hits an emulsion, but it kind of affects an area and gradually falls off, you see, like on the edges. So it's not like a kind of, you know, on off like a digital, right? It says, oh, this is my value and this is what I give you, right? The film kind of reacts to that light, right? So we basically, but you know, we realized something else happened in the process of us doing this, you know, that was giving us, you know, a little bit a distorted picture of what's happening with film. And let me just explain to you this. So when we this is actually what this kind of pixel would look like on actual film negative. But then when we actually understand that the film scanner is nothing else but a digital camera, you know, positioned in front of the film. So it's digital camera taking photos of a film print in our case, right? Well, what is a digital camera? Well, it's a Bayer pixel pattern, Bayer pattern of two greens and red and blue. Okay, so we're kind of limiting ourselves again to the digital type of pixel, right, which is kind of square and is strictly limited to on and off, right? So there you see there, it's kind of fixed grid. It's not like a necessary living around, right? It has a fixed grid. So then what really happens is if you take your original pixel, you transfer it on film, and then you scan it, what you do is you limit your scan of that actual pixel. If I'm comparing just these two pixels, you're limiting it only to the central area. And effectively what you get measured, well, you get measured the center of that pixel, but you don't really measure everything that happens around it, right? You're not really able to analyze that, this, if I'm just comparing pixel by pixel, I don't get the exact understanding what happened because the changes have happened outside of that pixel. You understand? So yes, if I just compare pixel by pixel, I get an RGB value, but it doesn't necessarily telling me that effect that we've seen about activation that happens surrounding that pixel. Okay. So we realized, okay, we need to find a better way of analysis. We need to describe this change that happens when you transfer something to film, not by just simply comparing pixel by pixel, but by comparing pixel to a group of pixels. So basically what we needed to do is we needed to include neighboring pixels in order for us to understand how far this halation, this diffusion effect, however we want to call it, this kind of effect at the moment, we're not naming it, we're just trying to get numerical values to what happened with it. We need to look outside of our pixel in the neighboring site. So we basically had to get and activate, our surrounding pixel. And interestingly, there is no technology available for that right now. All I can do right now is I can compare RGB value of a pixel. That's our technology. If I look at an image and I get an image back, I'm comparing RGB to RGB, right? So we had to find a new way how we're going to be able to describe film scans, okay? And there is one technology which is used in AI, and you probably heard it, people say, oh, we're using tokens, we're using vectors, right? And, GPT is using it and all this. And let me just explain you a little bit, I'm not gonna go too deep into what they are. I just want you to understand what it is. So basically, when we were building ChatGPTs and all these neural networks, we needed to find a way how we're going to optimize them having access to a very large amount of data, okay? So far what we've been doing is we've been basically saving, every letter as an ASCII code, right? And we basically, would then, have a text files, right? But in order to optimize, this for AI, because AI needed to shift through this data very fast, we build this what we call the vector databases. And what vector database does, it basically, think about this, like a multi-dimensional vector, can have maybe 1,000 dimensions, right? And we can save lots of information in it. So for example, I don't know, I have a black dog would be like a one vector. So ChatGPT actually, when it's loading, when it's being trained, it's not really training on actual text data. It's training on text data converted into vectors or tokens. And then these tokens is really what, and a neural network is being fed. So we were like, okay, why don't we then take all of this image data that came back from film, including surrounding pixels, including the change in luminance, including the geometrical change because of the, Weaver effect, before the flicker effect, all these variables, why don't we string them into one big vector effectively? And instead of comparing pixel by pixels, we compare vector to vector. So what we're doing is and not just that, accessing vectors is super fast and is super powerful. I can have, millions, billions of vectors in a database, and AI can very quickly analyze them. Where about me analyzing pixel by pixels, there are limitations. There are libraries like NumPy that can do this, but again, I'm just comparing something that doesn't really help me. So we developed this custom, encoding decoding system that was basically saving all this information that came back from film scans into a very large vector. So you understand now? So we would take an RGB and we would return back from film a long vector, which would have much more information to what's happening on that particular film scan than just comparing one pixel to another. And this is very, very important to understand. This has never been done before. This is absolutely, in our inventions, no one has ever done anything like this, and this technology never existed. And if you try to Google it, you'll see no one even spoke about it, right? Okay. So now we have a great system. So we had a way now to compare and understand what happens. And now we had the actual data that was telling us as to what's happening in a pixel. And we could say, okay, when you transfer a pixel of this brightness, this is the spread you get in the neighboring pixels of this value, of this value, of this value. And very quickly, we understood that these changes are happening on a subpixel level. Because you understand, the film doesn't operate in pixel squares. It operates in much smaller units, in silver halide molecule size, which are, much, much smaller. So it became obvious that for us to be able to actually emulate the look on film, we need to go to the subpixel level. So we can't just process the standard way how we're processing right now to say, hey, here's a bunch of pixels and just apply this processing to these pixels. No, we had to elevate pixels to a subpixel level, do the processing on subpixel levels, and then bring them back to the three-dimensionality of pixels, right? So you understand. So we had to basically invent a new dimension, new realm, where these calculations could be happening at a level that has a much higher precision than actual limitation of the pixels that we have right now. Okay, so and you know what? We were like, okay, how should we do this? It's math. Okay, so when we looked at it, what really happens? We were like, okay, what happens really? It became really clearly obvious what it is. So look, so the energy of light, and you know what? The film pixel, film doesn't react to a single photon of light. There has to be a group, there has to be a critical mass of photons that hit the film emulsion. And what happens, that energy of light spreads. It kind of, like if you think about it on a sensor is a firm, hard surface. So when the light hits, right, it just bounces up, right? It converts energy of the light into electrostatic charge a little bit, but some of that gets reflected back as well. Okay, so that there is a transfer of energy happening on a hard surface. But the film emulsion is a gelatin, and it's a soft surface, has a softness. So what happens, the energy of light hits it, and that energy then reacts and spreads itself around it, of course, because the energy gets absorbed, and and there is a reaction kind of that happens around it. And if we are kind of to measure how that energy spreads, we can see that there is center of that impact zone is where the activation happens, but then we have this a gradual fall off on the edges, right? So we went and we spoke to scientists who are much smarter than we are in this domain, and we asked them, so how should we do this, or what do you think about this? This is impossible problems to solve. And they said, oh, Dada, this is natural behavior. We have this in nature all the time. Just go to a pond and throw a stone in a pond. And what you're going to see? You're going to see this, cylindrical, circular spread of energy. So the energy of a stone, right, is going to hit viscosity of the water, and it's going to generate, this kind of wavy effect. And we know exactly how this works. We have a formula for it. Here is a map. So you're like, oh, wow, actually, someone has figured this out. Of course, it makes sense. There is just a big difference. These are coefficients. When you throw a stone, you have primarily the acceleration of the stone, through its own weight, and then the water has got much higher viscosity than the actual gelatin of a film, and the light has a much higher speed. But effectively, it is the same that happen. It's just a reaction of one energy transferring itself to another. So we were able to understand, of course, we understand what this math is. So basically, this is now how you recreate this effect mathematically. All right. So you have to apply multiple modulation to it, and multiple modulation means you're layering several frequencies. This now explains to you why in our grain, we are giving you all these negative print grains, and why these grains, like now you probably understand why, is because if we don't modulate on a multiple frequencies, we don't generate this kind of beautiful spread. This is basically the math behind us creating that little kind of spread is a multiple frequencies that we then oversample. And why oversampling is because we need to work on subpixel level, right? And oversampling allows us to do that, And then, we also have this effect halation. You're probably like, why, like I know that some of you told me, well, I turn on halation, I don't see anything, and actually you don't see anything, but on that pixel level, it's always there. And halation is that it gives us that shape of that kind of effect, how pixel, how that, how this formula, how this shape of energy spread, how it's in the center highest and how it slowly falls off by the edges. And the modulation transfer function is a function that controls how far from the center this effect is going to really, it's kind of the cutoff point. Where is this going to cut off? And like, the formula of MTF is kind of, controlling the steepness of the cutoff as well. So you see all of these mathematical, processes that can be accelerated in real time on a shader is really how we have regenerated exactly that effect. So then we said, okay, fine, let's do an original pixel. Let's see what it looks like on film. Let's kind of do a post scan, and then let's compare it now with our emulation. And we were getting exactly the same result. And then we would feed our emulation into that same neural network that we were using for analysis on film. And then we were able to see, is our emulation comparatively compared to it? Because you have to understand, guys, if we're going now far beyond to what our eye can see, we're working on this kind of, sub-pixel analysis level that is very, very hard for us just to look at the pixel and decide, hey, is this accurate or not? I mean, you really have to use an AI neural network to be able to help you understand whether your emulation is really working or not. And we were able to do it really well. And that was the first breakthrough. So we knew now, the token is a really right way how to be able to analyze this change. Okay, what's happening now? Where is it? There, fantastic. Okay, and then we decided to add a dimension of time, because filmmaking is a 4-dimensional art. It's a 3 dimensions of your RGB and a 4 dimension of time. Don't forget that. Your film has a duration. It's not like a still image, right? It changes from frame to frame. It actually changes every 25 milliseconds, right? So we said, and that was something we were never able to do before. Because if you think about it, every time we were doing any film emulation in the past, what we would do is we would take one test chart, another test chart, and we would compare chart to chart, frame to frame. But there was no correlation for us to say, what happens over a span of time? What happens with this particular pixel over a series of, let's say, 2,000 frames? And but what with the AI, because now we have these vectors, right? We can totally do this. And all we do is we just add another dimension to our vector, which is called dimension of time, right? And we say on frame 1, this happens, on frame 2, this happens, and so on. And we can then let AI give us the analysis of what happens with that. Okay, so give us the analysis to what happens with this small group of pixels over a period of time. And this is the result. And I don't know, how best, I know the best word how to describe this, it's called chaos, right? This is the word, right? Because, and no matter how much we try to understand, is there any coherence? Is there any kind of, repetitiveness? Is there any formula? Is there any predictability in what's going to happen? There was absolutely no way. There was no way for us to understand it. Film is 100% chaotic medium. You understand? There is, you could take a same frame and print it, in 200,000 frames, as many frames as it, give me the number, as much money as you have, go and print it. You are never going to get the same result back. It's impossible. There is so many variables, there is so many changes inside that film emulsion, that is just, there is no clear predictability on that microscopic level that is going to actually allow you to understand what and how film is going to react 100%. Okay, there is nobody who's ever going to be able to do this. It's a true chaos. So now we went and we said, oh my God, okay, fine. We understand how to do randomness, right? But we kind of went back to some of these, smart people than us, and we kind of shared with them the idea. And we said, look, everything behaves random. And they said to us, Dado, this is known effect, but you shouldn't talk to us physicists. You should talk to the neuroscientist about it. And this is a very interesting thing. I didn't even know about it, but there is this thing that neuroscientists researched a while ago, which is the effect of a campfire, right? So as you know, there's, people love campfires, right? And we used to, when we were living in not such a kind of, when we were still in caves and hunting around savannas, we were basically loving to gather around the fire, right? And I don't know, probably you can also recall, if you ever sat around fire, that fire has an interesting effect that it can actually really take your focus for a very long time. There is nothing more, meditational than looking at the fire. You can look at the fire for a long time. I mean, just look at on YouTube. There is channels that have videos of fire, that have hundreds of millions of views, right? Why is fire so magical? Why people don't mind looking at kind of the fire? And the answer that neuroscientists have is that they say because of its unpredictability. There is what they call a second level of activation in your visual cortex when you see something that's unpredictable. And your brain cannot recognize a pattern. And because it can recognize a pattern, it can't give up looking at something. And it's subconsciously driving you constantly to pay attention, the detail to it, because that complete unpredictability keeps you entertained and constantly trying to make you focus on it, thinking that something might happen there. And the moment you achieve synchronicity, the moment you achieve flexibility, you get bored with it, right? You're not bored with it, but your brain says, okay, I understand what's happening here. Don't worry, I don't want to waste your brain power on this anymore. Go and worry about other things. Get yourself a beer, whatever else, right? But the thing about this unpredictability is that it's actually draws attention. All right. And it's really like that. If you think about it, you don't have to be a neuroscientist to say, yeah, it's true. And I look at the fire, I really can actually spend certain amount of time just looking at it. It's really interesting. I don't mind. And then after a while, maybe I get bored, but not. But it's true. Yeah, looking at fire and having something as unpredictable as that is really true. So this effect has been observed. So it's not the new. However, nobody has ever actually observed it, whether this effect works on film or not, right? Whether there is a real, there is something there or not. So we kind of thought okay, how could we now make a little test or a little, approval to how could we see whether the film grain or this kind of effect, and you know what, we're not talking anymore just about film yet. Grain as such, understand, grain is just a oscillation and randomness. Okay, so for example, there is a software applications like even Live Grain, okay? What they do is they sample film, but even they do it our period of 2 minutes, I think, or something like that. And there is a grain application, like a grain inside DaVinci, which is, very repetitive. We can actually, when we sample the grain, we can get the repetitiveness. There's, we could be able to tell exactly when frame is duplicated. So what makes LiveGrain, what people, probably subjectively really liked about LiveGrain is because their samples are more than 2 minutes long. So in 2 minutes, it's very hard for your brain to find any repetitiveness, right? Because it doesn't really happen, okay? So we knew but our approach was a little bit different. We knew that we had a randomness. This was a very important factor, but it's not just about grain, it's the whole texture. This whole modulation function that I have showed you is really what we are analyzing now, okay? So we thought, okay, this could be a fun test to do. So what we did is following. We took a video. This is not the actual video. The video was something else. And what we did is we split it into two parts. On the left part was the same frame, but with no texture, just a standard Arilog C footage or Alexa footage. And on the right-hand side, we had the footage with our texture applied to it. Okay, so combination of grain lab and halation and modulation transfer function, everything like that, right? And then basically, so we had the same material playing side by side. And then we went to a tech conference in Los Angeles. So no film people wearing suits, nothing to do with creative industries, right? We didn't want to have any subjectiveness in this. And there was this video was 2 minutes long. And then we use this VR headset that have eye tracking in them. This eye tracking normally is used for them to be able to navigate through some AI games, but we use it differently. We just wanted to know where eyes are looking, right? And then we kind of had maybe just under 80 people, like 70 something people come through this. We sat like chair in the corner of a room, and then we would grab people and say, hey, do you want to see this little test? And you want to just watch this video, that's all it is. And they would then put this on and say, oh, thank you very much. Thank you. They're gone. And the next person comes and so on. So that's all we were doing. And we came back and we then said, okay, let's see the combined eye tracking data for the whole day. And look at this. 80% were looking at the right-hand side of the screen where we had the same image, but with texture applied to it. Is this not a proof that this kind of randomness fire effect is actually real and it works in film? If this is not the proof, if this is not the actual numerical, like a basically value that we can attach to it, and say, hey, the film grain really works. Because if I can choose between an image with grain and without, I subconsciously am choosing image with. Okay? And next time you're grading a movie and you wonder, should I put the grain or not? I think you have the answer. I think you have a numerical answer, why you should be using textures, why they're important, okay? So this was a proof, and this is basically then where we went and we started developing plugins. Okay, now, where we are right now is we're at a stage where cinematographers have given us very clear feedback, and they said to us this, Dado, we love the results. They're absolutely amazing. But I have to finish my shoot, sit with my colorist has to go make those changes, and then I have to go back to set and I have to say to my director, oh man, don't worry, it's going to look amazing when we put the stuff that we can do in post-production. They're basically asking, for something else. And what is something else is going to be primarily this box. Okay, so this is called FilmLab AI Live. Okay, so it's in development at the moment, and the reason why we did these test shots was because we really wanted to test the performance of this box on different cameras. So we tested yesterday RE35, Venice 2, Burano, Red, iPhone, yeah, Alexa Mini. We have some beautiful tests we shot, which you guys are also going to get access to through the training. I think we have a great material, and we're going to now be seeing how this live box is going to be performing on this material. What's going to be is basically an SDI in and out, and you'll have a little iPad that you'll be able to control all the parameters of FilmLab. Okay, so what's going to happen is with a less than 3 frames delay, you'll be able to get real time film texture emulation, the whole FilmLab suite, but basically live on set. And then cinematographer would be able then, whatever magic you created for them using plugins in DaVinci, you'll be able to save that metadata, load it as a profile into the FilmLab AI box, and then they will be able to say to their director, client, whatever they say, here you go, man, this is the look. And while they're shooting as well, they will be able to monitor, in that real time. And that way, I think the creativity, you know, with this plugin and ability for someone to influence their decisions to how they want to shoot and what they want to do with it is going to be pushed to much earlier in production already on set, which I think it's a huge benefit to all of us. Now, what I really wanted to do now, guys, and if you allow me, is I wanted to run a little poll by you because we've been receiving feedback now from people who are not just colorists like you are, people who are also basically cinematographers and so on. And I really wanted to ask you a couple of questions. I'm just launching this poll, so it should be very simple. I want to ask you like 4 simple questions. The first question is following. Should we separate FilmLab in such a way or group it in such a way, I'm not saying separate, that we have one section which is called negative lab, neg lab, let's say, right? That you put all the way at the front, right? Almost pre-IDT, where you're doing your negative emulation, negative grain halation as well, okay? And then we have a print part where you're doing your print emulation, print grain, and so on, right? So that you basically are, right now, as you know, we put texture all into one plugin, and it's very difficult. Then sometimes we put 2 plugins, you know, that are, you know, a little bit, so 2 same plugins sometimes. So should we make it a little bit easier? And should we do this, that we say, hey, let's have a neg lab, and let's have a print lab, and they all have, you know, ability to have just a negative grain, and this one just have a print grain. So they basically, you know, we're more logically separating these 2 separate things. Next question is, should we combine halation and grain into same plugin, right? Or should we keep them separate because it works much better separate? You know, this is exactly the thing, you know? The third question is, should we create a new dedicated optical filter? So basically, you know, at the moment, optical is a little bit hidden, you know, in halation. Should we just have a plugin that says, hey, I want a diffusion, I want a black miss promised, you know, like I want to basically have all of those effects, right? And you can use it how you want it. And number 4 is, would you like to be able to give your clients FilmLab player only option? Okay, so what is that? So for example, let's say Chad has just graded a movie, or we had a perfect example with Mark. You know, Mark said, yes, I grade, and then I give it to my clients, and my clients then do all the playouts and everything. But I can't give it to them because they don't have a FilmLab license, right? So wouldn't it be nice that you, as a license owner, you can give them a free plugin, but that plugin is player only. You know, they can only take the presets that you created, and they can modify them. They can't do anything with them, but they can just apply it on their timeline and be able to get the same effect, but without it being editable. So it's called player. So I want to just get the answers for that. So if you please, guys, help us with these answers. If you don't mind, just let us know what you think. I want to give you like a couple of seconds, and then we're going to go and see what you said. And then I want to also open a microphone. I want to hear some questions, some ideas, everything that you have that you know, that might, you know, help us understand what happens, you know, what we should do. Okay, and the results are in. Okay, let's see. Should we see now what's happening? Should we separate FilmLab plugins into negative and positive group? 100% people answered. Well done, you, my crowd, man. You're the best, guys. I love it. Okay, 80% yes. Should we say majority said yeah? Okay, that's very good. That's reassuring. I was hoping you're going to say yes because I strongly believe this would be an improvement. All right, number 2. Should we combine halation grain into same plugin? Yes or no? No. Do not do this, Dado. Don't separate them. Yes, don't. Okay, very good. I understand. We're not going to do it. I promise we won't. It's okay. Don't get angry with me. We want. I was just an idea. Some people said that, so I wanted to check with you. We're not going to separate. They should have a separate plugin. Okay, 3. Should we create a new dedicated optical plugin? Oh my God, 89 is. But why didn't you tell me this before? Why did I have to wait for you to ask me? Why don't you come and tell me, Dado, can you give me this plugin? I would have done it already by now. Shame on you. You need to give me more feedback. You have to be more proactive about it. If I knew that 89% of our users want to have it, I wouldn't even think about it. We're starting right now. The moment I finish this call, I'm going to start making the filter plugin, okay? Excellent. Okay. Would you like to be able to give your clients FilmLab player only option? 86. Yeah, my God. Clear winner. Clear winner. Love it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thank you very much. Let me screenshot this. So, because this is going into the my book I'm going to write one day about developing film emulation plugin. I'm going to show the world how users can shape the future of the product they use. Thank you very much. I really love it. Beautiful. And thank you for being so active about it. We're going to do these polls again. They're actually really fun. All right. So now let's do a little bit of chat. Luis, how are we doing in chat? Can you please help me? I wasn't able to read. Do you want to just give me an idea what's happening?
Jason's asking, how does the sensor noise compare to supplemental gain?
It's actually really interesting. You know, it is very beneficial. Very beneficial. You know, the sensor noise is very close to what mathematically we call white noise, right? So it has a absolute, you know, randomness. But it has a less change in amplitude, so it's more like on and off, right? So it's kind of, you know, oh, I have noise, I don't have noise, I have noise, I don't have noise, right? So there isn't like a large, you know, in film guys, you know, we see like a huge amplitudal changes. You know, it's much more like a, you know, up and down. With digital noise, you're having like a kind of, you know, more different pattern. Let's put it like that. It behaves differently. Okay, it's more kind of there's less jumping. It's more kind of, but it's equally, you know, completely randomized, and it's very beneficial. Actually, you know, having a little bit noise in your image is a good thing. Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's actually, you know, good thing for that effect of, you know, secondary visual cortex activation that helps people, or that subjectively draws people more to an image.
Okay, Lucia is asking, if I understand correctly, FilmLab AI Live is metadata only, and it's not baked into the OCF, right?
No, it's not baked. It's a preview only. But you know, we'll have an iPad application that is going to allow you to modify the settings on set. So you'll be able to dial in and out things as you like it while you shoot, and then you save this metadata, and that metadata you load into the plugins.
Okay, so someone's wondering if the FilmLab box will be available from rental houses.
Correct. At the first, we're going to only rent it out. We'll have like a few models that we will make available for rental only, and then depending on you know, how this whole you know, thing goes, how, you know, how happy are with its performance, when we establish all of this, like, you know, when you develop this stuff, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's, you know, like, you need to kind of allow a little bit time for the box to kind of, you know, be really in a good position, and then once that, then we're going to start selling it as well. But at first, it will be just a rental item that you can add to your camera package.
Lucas asking, will there be a way to create LUTs out of the FilmLab for more traditional workflows? Obviously, it won't maintain halation, but would it be useful for working on set?
There is actually a version of Look Designer number 4 coming, which is basically going to have all this, you know, beautiful image processing math of JPlog 2 and, you know, everything with it in it. So you will have a tool that's going to help you make LUTs. But FilmLab itself, we can't really make it because we're spreading it in several nodes, right? So and you know, to me, honestly, FilmLab is more about texture. You know, I of course will give you option to have the kind of film emulation color level, but really to me, like, you know, one of the biggest lessons I learned about it is that, you know, we've been focusing all these years. Like I have been emulating film for more than 25 years. All right. My very first film emulation job was Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes. Can we just Google when was Sherlock Holmes released by Guy Ritchie? So that was the first time I emulated film on Phantom camera. Okay, I couldn't have had a harder job for the first job. I mean, thank you very much, Guy Ritchie. So like and always what I was doing, I was just matching color, right? And then now that I'm in this whole texture research, I can just do texture, not put anything with color. I can apply texture to Rec. 9 image, and I'm like, wow, this looks so good. I don't even feel like they need a lot, right? So I really feel like the FilmLab magic is in that. But we do want to give you a really strong tool, and we need to upgrade our look designer, but it requires a lot of modeling of these profiles we have, because they're not perfect, they're old, they are what they are, they are historic profiles, and you know what, they have issues, they have problems, they can clip, they can do stuff, and we're just really trying to find a way how we can digitally remaster them, so that we can still use them in this high fidelity kind of processing pipelines that we are introducing now with JPlog 2 and so on. So yeah, longer answer, but hopefully it helps you understand what we're trying to do.
Okay, so would you use FilmLab AI for full on-set control or in conjunction with monitor LUTs?
Well, if we put the LUT inside, you could do it all in one go, for sure. Or you could just pipe it through a LUT box as well. Yeah, no problem. You could do one or another. I believe that probably, working with LUTs is going to be better, with a LUT box is going to be better, because they are better for real-time updating, and the FilmLab, so you run camera signal through FilmLab box to a LUT box to a monitor. And then basically you're still able to apply all the CDLs and everything and stuff like this to it.
Okay, so Rodrigo comments that it would be really neat to have a neg checkbox on the line of plugins to flip them into negative. Rodrigo, are you there?
Rodrigo, before you start, sorry, I love the posts on LinkedIn you're doing. Beautiful, mate. Guys, if you don't follow Rodrigo on LinkedIn, go and find him. Rodrigo, put your name, go and find him. He has been posting regularly, like what's contrast, what's saturation. It's wonderful. Rodrigo, well done for that. Please, keep going. Now ask me the question, please.
No, I was wondering if it's possible to put in Look Designer, FilmLab AI, the two German friends, negative checkbox, which will flip them into perceptual negative. So if we were to drop this into, say, negative space, we would achieve this a heightened effect of having them on positive after the pipeline.
I have been thinking about it. The problem about going into negative is that, you have to perform an inversion, right? And the problem happens that not every transform is invertible. Do you understand? If I have just two code values that are, horizontal, that are same, right? I'm not able to kind of, do a proper inversion on that level already. So, it's a really challenging, unless, I think, to be honest, we could build a DCTL that could just do an inversion, and you could then use it, in between to say, I don't want to make it in a plugin. So you could say, okay, my output of this, I'm inverting. And then we could make a DCTL that inverts. That could be possible. And then, use it at your own risk kind of stuff. But what I'm more interested in is actually at one moment, and don't ask me when that's going to happen, but I'm interested more in emulating negative based on its actual photometric values instead of the sampled 10-bit code values that we get back from scanners. That could be potentially another way how we could come close to that kind of negative space.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, next. Go.
Okay, so Aniruda is wondering if inode will ever go into any other space than JP-Log 2.
Never, never. Please don't. Aniruddha, this is the biggest gift I've given you. You should not like this make it destroyed by putting it in Da Vinci White Gamut. Da Vinci White Gamut. I'm sorry, I'm joking. No, Narita. There's a reason why. Look, number one, there is no other color management system on planet Earth and universe and beyond. One day we discover any other, civilization outside our own. We're going to ask them if they have anything like this, but I doubt it. I think we're the only people in the universe that have a color management that has only one drop down. I mean, come on, guys. Look at the Da Vinci's color space transform. How many clicks do you have to do just to do a simple transform from one color space to another, right? There's so many boxes. We have one. I mean, you're kidding me. All right. Number two, what other color management system allows you to, in parallel, I'm talking parallel, work in ASS1, ASS2, Arilog C4, Arilog C3, Da Vinci White Gamut. Can I continue? Right? Are you kidding me? What other space give you flexibility to be able to work in any of those? Right? Nothing. And you ask me, oh, change it to another space. You're not getting the point, Aniruddha. The point is that I'm upgrading you. Right? Imagine I give you this gorgeous car and it has some lovely wheels, and you say, oh, can you put like a little bit smaller tires on that? I can, Aniruddha, but you can't get in a corner with that. You'll crash on the first time you speed up, your car is going to skid. It needs those big wheels because it's very powerful.
That was a nice analogy.
Yeah, exactly. What you're talking about. This is the space,
Lucas saying film doesn't have the same dynamic range as digital cameras. And he's wondering how this film emulation will look in HDR.
No, that's absolutely not true. Film has more dynamic range than HDR. Much more than HDR. Much more. It's you have all of the dynamic range in film that you need. If anything, we don't have a problem with the dynamic range when it comes to film. That's for sure. That's never an issue. Oh, by the way, talking about this, how we're going to do HDR, I am making a plugin for you guys. One of those research, my Art of Color research group, DCTLs. So after the German one, we're doing Steve Yadlin's HDR approach. So you'll have a DCTL so you can work like Steve Yadlin. So I'll give you that as a next gift. So then it will help you a little bit with HDR as well.
Is there an approximate date for the FilmLab AI box to be released?
Well, depending how tests go, right? So the hardware and everything is going to be ready, production ready in a couple of weeks' time. And then if the tests are completed, I would imagine 4 to 6 weeks, we should be good. But if we find that there are still some issues, then it might take a little longer. This is the problem. We've never done this before. Nobody has. So I would love to give it. But yes, look, we are putting a lot of effort into this right now. My hope is really to have it ready, by let's say August time, that we can start shipping to rental companies as well and stuff like this. This is my hope.
Are you going to show this in the IBC?
Yes.
Amazing.
But I don't know if the IBC is market for that, to be honest. I'm thinking more that what I will do is that I will do like talks with the rental houses. We'll go to basically New York and work with Ari in New York and do an evening where you can come and see the box. I mean, just based on experience we had here yesterday in Mexico, and it was just much better than going to IBC, to be honest, or any conference like that, because we had these amazing Mexican cinematographers. And these guys are great. I mean, I have to tell you, it's it's nice to get what happens. I've been to ASC Clubhouse recently, and everyone's moaning. They're just moaning, right? You come to Mexico, man, I could do this. I could. People are so like in a different level here, like in level of excitement and also, and I think that affects creativity as well, right? If you hire a cinematographer who's coming on set moaning, right, about whatever happens or not happens, right? I don't know. Like I don't know whether this is the best frame of mind to get somebody to do amazing stuff, right? We're about to get these kind of guys here. They're like man, they're like so excited about things and have so many ideas how they want to work and this and that. I really think that this idea of us maybe going to working with rental houses that will be stocking the actual boxes and then doing a little events and meeting people, because this is not going to be for everybody. Understand, you have to be really like a forward thinking brain and person to kind of go and say, hey, you know what, I want to use this box that nobody else used before, and I'm not going to be afraid that I'm going to lose my job because of doing that, right? So yeah, it's not for the IBC crowd for sure, but anyway, we'll probably show it in any case, right?
Okay, I think we're out of questions.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, good. That was good. Thank you guys very much. I really, really appreciate your help in regards to helping us make these right decisions. Next week, we might do this HDR thing. I'll see. Have a great week and everybody. And I see you back 1 week time. Thank you, Luis, for help and enjoy.